Greetings, everyone, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining us on SG Live. And it's a real pleasure to be with you here on a warmish Tuesday afternoon. Got a lot of things to talk about today, and I'm going to dive straight into a few things. But before I do that, I'm really pleased to have Terry Mathis with us on the show. And Terry and I have teamed up to start doing these Let's Learn segments for SG Live. Terry, a very warm welcome to you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, absolutely. Hi, Sonny.
Hi.
And hello to everybody else out there too. Good morning to those of you in the U.S. and good afternoon to those of you in the U.K. and whatever it is to the rest of you in the rest of the world out there. Good to have you with us.
Terry, there's one thing I must do before we actually dive into stuff. I've got a very small video clip I want to play, and if you'll just bear with me for a second.
And just
Well,
when I
what can
thought,
I say?
just when I thought I was past all that, you didn't read my Facebook post this morning. I said to all of you who absolutely stubbornly refuse to forget my birthday, thanks for all the wishes. Actually, this wasn't a birthday. This was the anniversary, one of the anniversaries of my 39th birthday.
Oh,
And which,
right. Okay.
if you can guess, it was probably one of the higher numbers. As you get older, you don't necessarily feel older, but the numbers get scarier, as you go. So,
Yeah.
kind of in the scary number category now.
Well, I know it was your birthday last week, and I saw the email. And apologies, we couldn't do the show earlier, sort of last week, and wish you those happy birthday wishes. But many happy returns, and look forward to doing many more of those musical things for you as we go forward.
I'll get even with you for that too. I hope.
So, one thing I will say is this is a live show, and if you're watching this and you're chatting away and we can't see your chats, apologies for that. There is a slight time delay as it goes on live, but if you do want to get in touch with either of us, send an email. You can see the ticker at the bottom, live@redrisks.com, and Terry and I will certainly pick those emails up and respond back to you. Certainly as we get the emails in. Thank you for being patient with us on the chat side of things. Now, one of the things that I must say is that we need to talk about this Let's Learn segment, Terry, and explain to folks how it came about, what it's about, and what the intentions are. So I'll tell you what, let me sort of pass the mic to you, give me a bit of a breather as well. Give me your sort of views on how we came to this point and what we're intending to do.
Yeah, well, a part of safety, an important part of safety is competence, competencies. And it's amazing to me that most of the client companies that I deal with in my consultancy don't have a metric for that. There are a few companies that have what they call certifications. Uh-oh, gotta keep my computer from pinging here. They have some certification. So like if you want to be a welder for their company, you have to get with a certified welder and get them to certify you that you know what you're doing as a welder. Ironically, a lot of times if they don't have a certified welder, the site manager can do that, who may have never welded anything in their life, but they can certify you that. But there's not a competency there. And I think you folks that are listening, hopefully are mainly safety professionals at one level or another in the organization. Competency is one of the things you have to be working on, and it's not just a lot of times we say, well, I've got to create competency in my workers. No, you have to create competency in yourselves, and leadership is not a terribly well taught skill out there in the world. So that's something that Sonny and I are hoping to provide, is some insight, because we've both of us have seen literally hundreds, if not maybe over 1,000 effective leaders and ineffective leaders in safety. And we've seen the results of what they do and what they don't do out there. And hopefully It's not that we're that much smarter than any of you out there. We've just had more exposure to all of these things, and we can't make you smarter, but we can shorten your learning curve.
Yeah.
We can get you there more quickly, I think, by sharing some of these ideas than you could get there just figuring it out on your own, which
Yeah.
is what most leaders do.
Yeah, very well put, Terry. I mean, for me, it's very simple, and that is there's a lot to learn. I never stop learning, and one of the things I'd like to do is share some of the learning. So, with Terry's input and my input, I'd like to think that we've got about 60 plus years of experience. We don't know the answers to everything, but certainly between us, we'll discuss and debate. We may not always agree, but then we may disagree. But it's all done in the interest of we're sharing our knowledge. So I'm really looking forward to this. And as the show grows, we are still very young as a show. As the show grows, we look forward to your guidance and your thoughts and suggestions on future topics as well. So the topic we picked this week, Terry, is all about hierarchy of controls. I did a video a while back, and it was a worked example on hierarchy of controls, and it was quite interesting. It got a lot of people interested and got quite a lot of viewings on it. So I thought it'd be a good one for us to kick off with. Now, when you and I spoke, you had some firm thoughts and views on hierarchy of control. So let's start again from your side, and then we'll ping it backwards and forwards and get some thoughts on this. So, Terry, what's your views on hierarchy of controls?
Well, I think the big picture is that if you wanted to simplify the hierarchy of controls, instead of breaking it down into each one of these levels, you can break it down into two levels. There's two elements to safety. There's two elements to every accident. There's the conditions and the behaviors. And if you look at the hierarchy of controls, it basically goes from conditions to behaviors to we don't know what the hell to do, so let's put PPE on people, which is kind of the last step down there. So this is one of the ways to think about this. What are you controlling? Are you controlling your work environment? Or are you controlling the people within your work environment? And this is basically an assumption that NIOSH made back whenever it was that they first came up with this. I tried to look that up and couldn't find the exact date, but they are the originators of this. NIOSH is the one that did originally. There was a workshop called Safety Through Design, I think, and there's still a book called Safety Through Design, and that's where this thinking all originated. Now, again, this is when you talk about a hierarchy, this is a method of prioritization. So they're saying if you're going to try, to control a risk, what is the most elegant way to control the risk? If that doesn't work, what's next? What's next? What's next? And it goes down this particular line. And I've had a lot of people say, well, why don't we just use the top one for everything if that's the most elegant control? It kind of reminds me of one of my friends who said, well, why don't they make the whole airplane out of what they make that black boxes out of? So if the airplane crashes, it doesn't get destroyed, just like the black box doesn't get destroyed. Well, it sounds like a wonderful idea. It just doesn't work.
Yeah.
And a lot of times too, to try to eliminate a risk, I always remember I've done a lot of work in the nuclear power industry, and they have this sick joke, and I mean, it's universal. Every power plant I've ever gone to, someone's told me this, but they say, Terry, if we could eliminate radiation, steam, and high voltage, this would be a really safe place to work.
Yeah.
Now think about that. If you eliminate those three things, you don't have a nuclear power plant anymore.
Well, that's right. Yeah. I mean, taking one step back, everyone out there, I suspect, is very familiar with the hierarchy of control.
I would think so.
Yeah. I mean, just to be absolutely clear, we have this sort of inverted triangle. The NIOSH that you were referring to is an inverted triangle, and at the top, of course, is elimination. Then it goes through to substitution. Then it goes all the way down through to administrative controls and PP. I forgot what the middle one is now. It's, but it's elimination,
engineering
controls, then administrative controls and PP. Now, when I did this, I did a webinar a while back, and there was someone from the nuclear industry, and they said, "Well, look, Sonni, you've missed something out. You missed one out at the bottom called documentation." And I thought, well, yeah, I can understand that, but being a risk and safety professionals, I think the less choice you have, the better. And the higher up you go in terms of the inverted triangle towards elimination and substitution and so on, I would be more comfortable. Now, my experience with hierarchy of controls is along the same lines as yours, Terry, actually, and being sort of a process safety person in the background. We tended to use it a lot in terms of when we do HAZOPs or quantitative risk assessments and
Right.
so on. But I guess my experience on hierarchy of controls, and I'll probably get toasted for this actually, but I'm going to say it, is it's okay to pick a control. It's okay to pick elimination or whatever. But the fundamental point for me is all about risk and risk management. We know risk is the product of two key factors: consequences and likelihood. So if, for example, you're saying putting a control measure in from your hierarchy of controls, you want to make sure that you're doing something in terms of not only reducing, potential likelihood, but also in terms of managing those consequences. But where we tend to fail is we never really test certain controls. We pick a control and we say, bingo, bango, it does it, right? Risk is acceptable, whatever you want to call it, alarp, tolerable, etc. And we move on. But we don't actually ask the question afterwards, is that control measure really effective? And I find the weakness is generally further down, in terms of things like administrative controls, PP, wherever people are involved, they tend to be a bit sort of thin, I would say, in terms of. Is that your experience as well, Terry?
Yes, I think too, selecting one is probably a bad idea always.
Mm,
Real control over risk is usually multiple controls, not one single control out there anywhere. In fact, people like Todd Conklin and some of the HOP folks out there are saying once you get down to the people part of this, the administrative controls, plan for failure. People
yeah,
are not perfect. They're going to make mistakes, So what's your backup plan? How do you, yes, you want to prevent, but how do you recover? So I always use the example, when they first started, people started doing trapeze acts in the circus. The first few who fell died.
yeah,
And then they said, let's put a net under them,
yeah,
and that way when they fall, they got some kind of chance of succeed. So they're planning for failure, right?
yeah, yeah,
Now,
yeah,
yeah, wouldn't it
absolutely,
be Wouldn't it be nice if you could prevent them from ever losing the grip on that trapeze bar? But
absolutely, yeah,
it's going to happen from time to time. So what's Plan B? And I think the hierarchy needs to think about that too. So you say, well, we eliminated this risk. By the way, did you ever read Murphy's Law? The Murphy was this research engineer and basically said everything that can go wrong will go wrong.
go
And if you
wrong, yeah,
if you think that way, maybe you'll prevent some things from going wrong. But his very
yeah,
last one, and I don't think it was in the book. I think it was actually in one of his articles. He said you can't make anything idiot proof.
no.
And you know why he said that was true? Because idiots are too smart and they'll figure out a way around it. you know, so once you get down to the people part of safety, this is where a lot of safety folks, especially technically trained when engineers, process people, and everything else, get incredibly frustrated because
Mm.
people are a tougher variable to control than machines and equipment.
Yeah, it reminds me, one of my favorite, one of my mentors, my sort of folks who really helped me a lot in the past is Trevor Klett, and he wrote these books, Things That Can Go Wrong, Things That Continuously Going Wrong, etc. And I always remember a few things that he always says, and that is when it comes down to human error, there's no way you can sort of out design all of these things, and that's literally when you think about hierarchy of controls, and you come down to the bottom pieces of PPE. Classic case being COVID-19. Ooh, I don't want to talk about COVID. Ooh, and the masks and everything else, right? But Trevor Klett's always. I mean, the one line that I remember from his sort of several things he says was, saying, "Well, why did you fall down the stairs? What was it?" And they said, "Well, it's gravity, right?" So
Mm-hmm. Root cause.
exactly, and then you try and say, well, can we stop that? Can we stop this? It gets very, very difficult when you try and address human error and behaviors and all the other things. And I said I mentioned it. I'm sorry I mentioned the COVID thing as a classic example. If we're to pick people from the general public and we're going to put them in an industrial sort of environment, I thought to myself, well, hang on a minute. We're going to pick these people and we're going to ask them as soon as they come in to start wearing safety hats and glasses and overalls and everything else. And lo and behold, after a short period of time, they do 99% of the time follow the rules, okay? But why is it when you're not in that sort of enclave or in that sort of fixed boundary of a company, we find it difficult to wear these masks, right? And everyone's got an opinion. Some people will wear it, some people won't wear it, and we end up being debating about the issues, not realizing the consequences are still the same, right? Then it all boils down to likelihood. Are you going to be in the vicinity of someone breathing on you or coughing on you? Sorry, I rambled on a bit there, Terry, but it's quite a controversial subject.
When I looked up hierarchy of controls, just to kind of refresh my thinking on it and everything, it was amazing that probably a third of the articles that popped up on the front page were about applying the hierarchy of controls to COVID. And a lot of people are thinking that way. One of the things that I have thought of over the years. First of all, you talk about being controversial and getting slammed. This is probably one that'll get me that way, since you jump in with
well,
most
let's do it. Let's give it some turbocharge.
Okay, here's my thought. Root cause analysis is all about the top of the pyramid. Once you get down to human beings, human behavior doesn't have a root cause. I'm sorry, it doesn't. It has influences, and almost seldom, almost never is it just one. It's almost entirely more than one. I worked with Dean Gano at NASA back a number of years ago, and Dean Gano wrote a book called the Apollo Root Cause Method. And one of the controversial things that he said that got him in a lot of hot water with people was that no accident has, or almost no accidents have, a root cause. That almost always you can follow two chains from this accident, going down, and one is behavioral and one's conditional, which really got to, and that's my part. That probably influenced my thinking about the hierarchy of controls. It's partly conditional and partly behavioral, so what are they? The other thing was he just slammed things like Taproot and some of these other methodologies by saying, no, 5 down's not any magic number. Some root causes are going to be 25 down, and some of them are going to be 1 down the chain like that. And he said, most of the time, the people that are trying to find root cause never find it. They just run out of data. So they get down to the bottom of the chain and they said, that's the bottom of the chain. He says, no, it's not. You just couldn't answer the next why question. You didn't have enough information to get to that next level down over there. So anyway, he was a fascinating guy to me to work on. If any of you have ever seen the movie Apollo 13, there was a place in the movie where they walked into a room where 2 guys were standing there in front of a kind of a whiteboard situation, and they threw a bunch of junk down on a table, hoses and clamps and things like that. And they said, here's what they've got to work with. If you don't know that, that's called the Gano room. Okay.
All right. Okay.
At one time, I don't know if it's still true. I haven't worked with NASA for a few years, but at one time, if a spacecraft was up and had a problem, it was all Dean Gano's methodology used to try to solve that problem. And there were 2 people in this room trained in that methodology, and tried to figure out exactly what their best course of action was. But that's kind of an interesting thing to me. Does human behavior have a root cause? And almost everybody's accident investigations assumes that it does. What's the root cause, or else maybe just a corrective action. And I think that's probably more accurate.
Let's go into that a bit more. Asif has made a comment. He's agreeing with us, and he says specifically someone. I don't know if you can see that across the bottom.
Yeah, I see.
Specifically, someone wearing eyeglasses suffers a lot with mask. Yeah, that's Asif. You're absolutely right. Because we've in the UK. I don't know if it's the same in the US. We've in the UK seen people now saying, "Well, I get over this foggy glass issue by wearing 2 masks." Okay, and someone says, well, why don't you just get glasses that are more engineeringly fit for purpose? You can get these anti-fogging glasses and so on. So we're going up and down this hierarchy of controls. We get to a point, we're not going to eliminate it, okay, because COVID is going to be around for, I hope not too long, but it's going to be around. So then we get down to engineering controls, and we're bobbling between engineering controls, administrative, and PPE. Where would you like to be on that triangle?
Well, exactly. But as if one of the things that I think you're pointing out is one of my favorite observations that W. Edwards Deming made
Uh-huh.
back a number of years ago. He said one of the number one causes of problems is solutions.
Mhm.
And so often we look at a problem and we look at it rather superficially, and we solve that problem and create five more, that we really didn't intend to. And I think this is a perfect example. Yes, let's wear a mask. Now, what happens to your glasses when you wear a mask and all your breath comes up out of the top of the mask? So they started putting this little piece of wire in the top of your mask to make it fit, a little more conformed over your nose. There's all kinds of things that they've done for that. But very often when we solve a problem, we create another one, and you can chase that chain forever. Unless you come up with really elegant solutions at the top.
Let's throw a real curveball of a question here. So let's have a keep or ditch. Okay, hierarchy of controls. I mean, it's a no-brainer, really. In some ways, we have to keep it. Do we ditch bits of it? I mean, I know where I'd like to be. I'd like to be further up on the triangle, the inverted triangle towards elimination and substitution. I think it's with us for good, right? It's
Oh,
written in
I
tablet.
think so.
It's
It-
written
you know,
in tablet.
it's being used where it's being used to me the most effectively is in design.
Mm,
When you build a brand new facility, you've got none of these legacy problems out
mm,
there, and you start looking at what this is all about. If you do a good job of hazard and potential hazard identification, and then you use this kind of thinking, you can build an incredibly safe facility.
mm.
Now, the problem is, how many of you out there have a safe facility, a brand new, well-designed, safe facility? Most of you have something that's 40 years old and has been revamped 80 times, and has all kinds of workovers and everything else out there, and you're still identifying some of these.
Well, you've done something quite interesting here, because when you think about something, you think about sweet spots, yeah. Where do you want to be? Where is the best spot? And when you mentioned engineering controls there, it made me go back a little bit into my oil and gas days with BP and a few other oil and gas companies, and they have a sort of an approach is called inherently safer design.
Mhm.
So they actually say, well, we don't want to get into the situation of retrofitting or eliminating hazards or potential risks after the design stage. Let's get it all sorted in the design phase, right up front.
Right.
Conceptual, etc. And if we were to impart our knowledge and our experience in terms of, certainly from my perspective, if you had to pick a playground to be in when you're applying hierarchy of controls, you probably passed the elimination stage because you've done all your checks through HAZOPs and various other things. But a golden ticket, a golden opportunity will be to go right back to the design stage and engineer out as much of the issues as you can. Does that chime with you as well?
Well, certainly, it's an elegant solution. But one of the analogies that I use very often in trying to explain this is I ask people, "Do you know of any place on this planet that's so safe that no matter what you do there, you can't possibly get injured?" And
Mhm.
probably the best answer to that question is a padded cell in a mental institution. And even that requires a piece of PPE to supplement it. They put you in a straitjacket and then they put you in the padded cell, because people who are determined to hurt themselves can do so even in a padded cell. And
Yeah.
when you consider that, maybe it's impossible to make something 100% safe. And that's why I say you're probably going to wind up using at least two of those controls in that hierarchy if you're really going to be effective in what you're doing. And I mean, I've got examples and examples of that, that have happened out there in the world where people thought they had made the perfect facility and everything. That, interesting at the two levels out there. Something that I worked, this is a number of years ago now, probably 10 or 12 years ago. I was working with a company, their forest products company, and they had what's called a particle board plant. They actually take sawdust and glue it together and make what they call particle board. And
Yeah.
this one plant manager was brilliant engineer, really, really sharp guy, and people savvy too, which isn't the forte of all engineers, as you know. But, but oh, come on, I paid my price to make fun of us. Okay, uh, the so he had a couple of goals in mind. He had managed a number of these similar plants for his company, most of them 50, 60 years old and everything. He had all these problems with it, and he had this idealistic view that he was going to build this brand new plant. They were going to engineer it incredibly safe, and then he was going to go to this thing which was really popular 10 or 15 years ago called self-directed work teams. So he wasn't going to have people needing to be supervised and overseen and regulated and controlled and micromanaged and everything else. They were gonna do this. So they built this plant in Arkansas, which, if you're familiar with the U.S., is out in the forest, for one
Yeah,
thing,
yeah.
but not a heavily populated or metropolitan state or anything like that. So anyway, they go out there and they put the latest, greatest, newest, most wonderful equipment in this plant. He has a lot of say in the engineering of it, although a lot of the equipment's new. It's not the kind he used before. And then he hires these people out there. And the first little slap in the face he got was that nobody that he hired had ever been on a self-directed work team. They didn't know what one was. They didn't know how one worked. They had always been, hang your brain at the door and do as you're told kind of workers over there. And anyway, he put this whole thing together. He had it just lined up to be perfect, and the machinery wouldn't work. It was brand new machinery. It had just come over from Germany and had some bugs in it and everything else. So he worked on it, and they called other engineers in and worked on it. And finally, like a lot of companies, they brought the old hands in that could fix anything with duct tape and baling wire. And they finally made the equipment work. They finally got the plant operational. And while they were doing that, they beat all the self-directedness out of the employees, because they were those old style managers, shut up and do as I told you, kind of people. And so he had to start all over again with his self-directed ideas after he got his plant,
But
mechanically working.
yeah, I was going to say, but that's not uncommon. A lot of
Oh
the
no.
times, certainly, maybe not so much now because you have all these factory acceptance tests and everything else that goes on. But certainly, when I left university back in 1987, okay, and I set out in industry, there was occasions when the projects department would produce this new something, and then they'd bring it out, they'd wheel it out, and then usually we're tinkering around afterwards, trying to iron out issues if it's to do with safety or it's to do with productivity or something, and it's just in I think we're a lot better now, but certainly we've got to eliminate all of those things. Now, Terry, I see. Oh, Malcolm, welcome. Thank you very much. Cover the glasses with washing up liquid prevents fogging.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good one, Malcolm. I don't know if people want to try that one, but that's a good one to share. Thank you.
Several ways to make glasses more fog resistant.
Mm,
A number of products out there on the market, and even some kind of if you don't need glasses like I do to see, if you're just using them to protect your eyes, there's some of the PPE kind of glasses that are automatically made fog resistant.
yeah, yeah.
Which helps. But
I think the segment's called "Let's Learn." Okay, so let's dive into the recesses of our mind and say, well, between you and me, let's sort of share thoughts as to where we've sort of failed or where we think we could have done better or where we really did well in terms of hierarchy of controls. Let me start that off by saying my experience of hierarchy of controls where it's been really difficult to implement or to get conversations going are where people have different opinions. You would certainly go from elimination, substitution down to engineering controls, etc. And then there's that point where there's arguments ahoy. People would constantly debate and discuss and so on. I think that's what I call paralysis by analysis. And you would tend to really try and get to a point where you think it's perfect. I came to the conclusion that it's never going to be 100% perfect. You want to always try and be higher up on the inverted triangle rather than lower down. If you're in doubt and you're not sure, look at look at it in terms of consequences and likelihood. There might be some minutiae of differences where a slightly lower down control might actually do better. Not always, might do. So you have to, when you get to that point where when you're fine tuning, look at consequences and likelihood. That for me eliminates quite a lot of the discussions and debate. Again, not always, and I put that caveat in there. Not always, but most of the time. Maybe it's the same as yours, Terry. Have you got any that you think about?
Well, one of the advantages to me of starting at the top of the hierarchy of controls is that sometimes you ask this dumb question that you would totally ignore. Risks become invisible. Anything in the workplace, once you've worked at it for years and years, it becomes invisible.
Yes, like wallpaper, I guess, doesn't it? Just
It is,
blend. Yeah,
it's just the way it is, and we found a lot of people call it new eyes or things like that. At Coca-Cola during my corporate career, we called it dumb questions, and what would happen is you'd walk into an area where you hadn't done the work and you'd look at something, you'd say, why do you do it that way? Or why is this over here? Or why don't you locate those closer to where you need them or something like that? Well, that's a dumb question to a person who works in there, because the obvious answer is, well, we've always done it that way. It's a heritage practice, and a lot of times by starting at the top of this pyramid, you back up and you ask yourself, well, is that necessary? Do we really have to have that? And almost everything that that's out there is out there for a reason. The problem is the reason goes away and the thing doesn't. The whole reason why we designed it that way was something that we've changed 20 years ago, but it's still sitting there cranking the way it always had. And I think that's one of the values of doing that. You reminded me of one of my favorite sayings back when one of the other things you said. I think Deming said this the first time I ever heard it too. He said, in theory, there's no difference between theory and practice.
I remember that one. Yeah.
In practice, there is. So you were talking about trying things out. I think this is one of the weaknesses of the hierarchy. People, as you said, they just assume, oh, well, we fixed the problem. Well, did you? Do you have any kind of reliability testing after you put your control in place?
Yeah. But, when you and me, as we've gone through our life, we've picked up all these expressions and sayings, and I've come to the point. Yeah, and I've come to a point where they've actually played quite a pivotal role in a lot of things I do. I think one of my favorites, going off piste here, but one of my favorites is safety. Risk and safety is management is not rocket science. Rocket science is easier.
That's true.
So I think, so in terms of hierarchy of controls, I guess some of the key takeaways are that, and help me with this one, is it's here to stay. Better to be up the triangle in terms of elimination, substitution, working your way down, rather than at the bottom, because as you get further towards the bottom, there is a greater potential for that risk to be happening, the likelihood and consequences.
More variation and more variables. Yes, harder to control.
Sure, because you're into human errors, human behaviors, confirmation bias, all sorts of things. In terms of sweet spots, if you had to pick a fight and you had to pick a battleground that works really well, try and do it in the engineering sort of a block. And if you can get rid of all those issues before you roll it out into the field at the design stage, do that. Have I missed anything? I'm sure there's loads more.
No, but again, I think so many people look at the hierarchy of controls and think either or. And I don't think that's I think that's very seldom the answer. Old multiple choice test that you took in school, very often the answer is D, all of the above. You should be doing something in all of this. Some of the represented labor forces in the U.S. Really rebelled against things like behavior-based safety. And their argument was the hierarchy of control. Well, why are you coming down and making us solve these problems when you should be solving them at this higher level out there? And that's a legitimate observation. However, what the reality of what happens in most industries is you start working from the top down, and when you get to the bottom, there's something left. There's something else that you really ought to take care of that hasn't been taken care of in those higher things. And what do? Do you ignore it, or do you make a new program down here at the bottom to sweep it up? And a lot of the variations in trying to control behavior, I think, range all the way from duplicating your administrative controls to identifying the gap between where your administrative controls leave off and zero accidents and addressing that. And that's, to me, the much more elegant solution down there. So a lot of what I've done in my career is that bottom thing down there, the administrative controls, because I think most organizations are better at the top of the pyramid than they are at the bottom of it. And, most people, most managers of technical facilities are technically trained people, and technically trained people know a lot more about machines and circuits than they do about human beings, and are better at controlling those things. So we've had to help them more with that bottom of the pyramid, I think, than we have with the top of the pyramid.
I think you're right. Yeah, I think you're spot on. I mean, the bottom of the pyramid is where you've got all the human dynamics going on, and people's opinions and views and confirmation bias and all the other biases you think on. Sometimes a bit of an uncomfortable place to be in, because it can be argumentative, demonstrative, but it's unavoidable. And I think if you have to pick something on there as a control measure, just be also aware that there are more greater vulnerabilities with those, because you're depending on humans. So I see we've got a comment back from Asif. Thank you, Asif, on Dr. Malcolm's suggestions about the washing up liquid. He says, Dr. Malcolm, the liquid may lead to chemical hazards as well as irritation, skin allergy, or dermatitis. I can concur with that. So again, whoever's going to be putting washing up liquid on their glasses, be mindful that you may not always work for you. And that's, again, in terms of risk management, making sure that you don't have any allergy issues. Terry, believe it or not,
I'd like to give you and I a challenge at this point, that for the rest of this, we solve more problems than fogging glasses. we get some information out there that'll help people with other problems besides just that too. But no, it's.
I think if you think about it, that's a good point, Terry. I think you can see where a lot of the times people have more discussions. You see, they say engineering is, mathematics, the queen of science. It's very black and white. Okay, so there's no shades of gray. And the further down you go on the hierarchy of controls, the more shades of gray. So you will have people bringing out everything from the bookshelves, from the kitchen cupboards, to talk about in terms of risk and safety management. I mean, I threw in COVID there, please forgive me, but that's a classic example. The other things are people saying, well, when it's snow and ice, or there's no end, because wherever there's a lot of human behavior involved, you can be rest assured that's a massive playground of conversations and discussions.
I've got hundreds of stories that I wish I could tell everybody all the time, and that sit and listen patiently to, but of situations where organizations have eliminated hazards and people still get hurt. If you got holes in the concrete and you fill those holes, people trip on level ground. It's if you eliminate the corners that stick out, they run into the corner that doesn't stick out. It's one of those things you have to address the top and the bottom of the pyramid, I think, in everything, because all accidents have situational and behavioral elements to them. And if you're not attacking the accidents from both fronts, you're missing opportunities to be effective. I have a lot of technically trained, mainly engineers, who say, well, gosh, Terry, I know how to work with this equipment. I don't know how all that touchy-feely human culture stuff and things like that. That's not what I want to work with. And I say, okay, here's your challenge. Be so perfect at the engineering that you never have to get down the triangle to those human things. If you can eliminate all your accidents before you ever get down to those administrative controls, you've used your strengths to great advantage like that. But if you get down there and you still have those, you're going to have to address those.
I see a good comment here from Yasser Ali Abbasi. Good afternoon, I suspect, wherever you are, Yasser. Some administrative controls are the tools to implement adequately top control risk hierarchy triangle. Well, I can't deny that. I think it's a good point.
Well, certainly. I mean, certain behaviors can overcome certain conditional risks. You know, you got a hole in the floor. Well, great. Is someone going to blindly walk into it and step in it, or are they going to look where they're going and avoid it? You know, so a lot of times it's there. Now, again, that shouldn't be a justification for leaving the hole in the floor. and I think that's where a lot of people come off on thinking that way, is that, well, if you can solve it all, with human behavior, oh, let's just do that. That's a more elegant solution than having to fix everything. And so, and a lot of managers like that too, because they can abdicate their responsibility, just blame everything on the workers.
Yeah, I'm thinking aloud now. So we've spent quite a bit of time talking about COVID, quite a bit of time talking about other things. In terms of hierarchy of controls, and you look at it from an engineering perspective, there's no end to the topics that you and I can talk about. For example, we've talked about residual risk. Okay, so even after you've applied the hierarchy of controls, there is a residual risk aspect to it. Do you accept it or not accept it? Then there's things like change, management of change, another big hot topic, big issue, which I think, Terry, we should put that to the cards as well, and we should discuss that. Certainly, yeah, Trevor Kletz he's been a big, powerful advocate on how change or poorly managed change has led to some of the world's greatest catastrophes and disasters. Believe it or not, I was going to say, believe it or not, we've chalked up 42 minutes, Terry.
I know, and we need 42 minutes left here. Back to my point and your point, putting them together here, management of change has both behavioral and conditional elements to it also. In your field, I helped an international oil company just a couple of years ago who was all offshore, and they were moving onshore for the first time, and bought some onshore properties, and we're going to manage them, and they hired me to come in and help them because they weren't having the same luck with their onshore that they had with their offshore, but trying to apply the same principles there. So one of the things that I found was that the properties they bought were made to be sold. And you've probably, being in the petroleum industry, you build some, especially upstream, you build some of those properties to operate, and you build some of them to sell. And the ones you build to operate are really nicely designed and everything. And every time you make a change in those, you make sure this change is standardized with all the other equipment. So, if the go is on this side and the stop is on this side, you make sure it's that way on every piece of equipment that you do out there. If you're just building it to sell, you buy the cheapest go and stop control you can get and throw it onto the thing, and then hope for the buyer gets there before it breaks.
So, yeah. Malcolm's come back with a comment. Mal, I'll have to get you on the show one day. Play that banjo that you normally play. It says residual risk is subjective and depends on the RA initiator. Yes, I don't disagree with that, Mal. In fact, any form of risk analysis I found, if I'm a participant in it, I'm always not. Well, I would 100% agree with the person who's chairing or facilitating, and likewise, when I'm chairing or facilitating, everybody agrees with me. I think there is a point when you can come to a sort of a mutual parking point, and you say, well, it is what it is. It is subjective, and that's why a lot of companies, certainly in the oil and gas sector, like BP and so on, have got rules of engagement and rules in terms of acceptance of those risks. Residual risk analysis is a big subject, and I think we should cover this in the future as to at what point do you say that, at what point do you say that risk is acceptable?
One point I'd make, Dr. Roberts, is there's another way of thinking about that. Residual risk is subjective if you're projecting it. If you're sitting here saying, I think someone could get hurt with this, so we ought to fix it. Now, if you've had 10 accidents on that in the last month, it's no longer subjective. That experiential thing brings it out of subjectivity and says we've got a problem. And I think sometimes that's more the divider between subjective and objective, is what happened? That's one of the reasons we're so reactive in safety, isn't it? Because we don't trust our subjective data. We don't trust our upstream what if opinion kind of data and everything like that, but we trust those accidents. Once somebody gets hurt out there, we had a sick joke at Coca-Cola that we'd identify something out there that was dangerous in the workplace, and someone would say, who wants to volunteer to get hurt on it so we can get it fixed? Because literally a lot of times until somebody got injured there, we weren't going to fix it. That was all fluffy subjective data.
You've got an official introduction to Mal here. He says, Mal, please, Terry.
Okay, Mal. I'm sorry, Mal. Dr. Roberts is too formal.
Hard,
Okay,
he's worked hard for that PhD, but he still prefers Mal. And he's a mean banjo player. I think he's a banjo or ukulele. You should hear him play that.
When you bring it, I'll bring my guitar and we'll see if we can tune together.
Oh God, no. I'll just play the fiddle. So Terry, we've got no end of a pot of discussions, and all I'm going to say is we're going to do this Tuesdays, as many Tuesdays as we can, for as long as we can, and for as long as you guys are on, Mal, Yasser, all you guys, give us the feedback and whatever support you can in terms of making the show really focused on learning, and let's learn. In this short, I say short, 3/4 of an hour segment, I've already learned quite a few things about fogging and various other things, views on surfactants. And there you go. Mal's made a comment. Doctor is too formal in these forums. Yes, absolutely. You're right,
gotcha.
Mal.
People call me Mr. Mathis, and I tell everyone that's my father. I'm Terry. Okay, just call me Terry. I understand exactly where you're coming from, Mal.
Well, we need to sort of think about a topic for next week. And before the session, Terry and I were having a discussion, and we sort of came across a title of "Stumbling Blocks to Good Safety Leadership." Terry, good subject.
I think so. I just wrote an article about this. I think it's out right now. If it's not, it's coming out the first of the month here in a magazine in the U.S. called EHS Today. And I titled it more negatively, and Sonni and I were talking about that we wanted to state it as the what to do rather than what not to do kind of things. But I think I titled it something like how safety leaders undermine their own safety projects, their own safety initiatives and everything. And that was kind of from a bag of my experience that I just had with 2 or 3 clients that I went out there, and I thought very well-intentioned leaders were making a huge mess of their own safety program, totally unknowing exactly what they were doing out there in the field. So I thought maybe that knowledge could help other safety leaders to avoid some of those things.
I think it's a great topic, actually, Terry, and in fact, Mal's hit back with a comment. Great subject. Thanks, Mal. Let me just flick back to a comment Asif's made. He said, "What's your thoughts about last-minute risk assessment?" Okay, I'll share my thoughts, and Terry will share his thoughts. My thoughts are that I don't mind last-minute risk assessments. It really depends on the team makeup, and it really depends on whether it's last minute because you've forgotten something, or you're under production pressure or financial pressures. Be cautious, because that's where the human error part can play a bigger role, confirmation biases. And I'm sure you're familiar with dynamic risk assessments, job safety analysis. A lot of these things can be done last minute, but always be a bit mindful that there is a pressure in terms of delivery. And Terry, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've seen last-minute risk assessments done elegantly, really effectively, and everything. And I've seen them where they were just, a busy work that you had to do before you started. And I think a lot of that has to do with how structured they are. One of the things, it's like a perception survey. One of the things you have to realize is that people don't know what they don't know. So when you ask them in a perception survey, you make a statement you want them to agree or disagree with, like I'm sufficiently trained to know what my risks are and handle them in my job, like that. They don't know that. What are they comparing that to? I mean, there may be a factory next door that does a 50 times better job of it than they do, but they've never compared and contrasted. So Mal, I think when it's part of the JSA or a last thing or a reality check on the JSA, Did we go over everything? When it has points that you're looking for, I think it's better than just what are the dangers here.
Yeah. Terry, we've just had another one to the pot now about JSAs and last minute risk assessments, LMRAs and powers and everything else. I guess I've been a little bit shielded in the sense that in the oil and gas industry, and certainly in the chemical industry and so on, we generally don't tend to have last minute risk assessments. They're always scheduled in such a way. If there is something, it's because it could be during a turnaround, for example, or during a shutdown, and we have things like pre-startup safety reviews, PSSRs. So maybe I'm not as exposed to last minute risk assessments, but I would think they do happen. But my experience will be to say, take care, because it is certainly something that can be more human error issues.
I see it more in construction industry. I work with a lot of pipeline construction companies, and they all do it. It's kind of a ritual in the pipeline construction companies.
Chiral, what I practice with LMRA is provide one small card containing all important checklists which need to be checked. It's almost like a job safety analysis type
I
thing.
like
CVR.
checklists.
Yeah, they're good. In fact, George is saying, thanks a lot both for the discussion. Looking forward to next week. So am I, especially with a conversation which is all about safety leadership. I think that's going to be well, let's say it's going to be interesting. Yes, good evening from the USC. I think, is that UAE? If the supervisor are good in safety leadership, then dynamic risk assessments are great. Yeah, I do agree with you. I think the team composition plays a huge role. There have been risk assessments that I've been in which have been absolute disasters because the team was just plucked randomly because they had to do the risk assessment. Mal says, let's cover that in another session. Which one, Mal? Just come back and let us know. It's prevalent in renewables. Yes, I don't disagree with you, Mal. Sorry, Terry, I'm picking up a lot of questions. Do
Yeah, no,
jump
I'm
in and
looking at
dive
them
in.
too here. One thing I'd like to say, Sonni, to everybody, because I get the feeling a bunch of them are about to jump off. When you see our topic, if you could send us some specific examples from your industry or specific issues and everything like that, I think that would help Sonni and I to narrow in, because I mean, God, I've done over 2,000 projects, over the last little while. So if you want to talk about construction, you want to talk about upstream, downstream, midstream, you want to, anything like that. The more you can zero us in on your specific issues that you'd like us to talk about, probably the better we can target this.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'm just going to flash it up right now in terms of the fact that send us an email live@redrisks.com. Terry and I will pick that email up and we will certainly add it to the pile. I always do one thing, and that is well before the live events. So, for example, next Tuesday's event, as I mentioned, is about stumbling blocks to good safety leadership. On the Monday, I will cascade out through the social medias what it is. And you will know after a period of time, this is only the third show, I think, we will stick to continuity, because continuity is really important in this live event to make sure that we stick to a day and a time so that you can be tuned into that. Terry, anything I've forgotten along the way?
Probably so, but I've forgotten it too. So we're both in the same boat here together. I hope the interaction. We felt like not just that Sonni and I are friends or that we're buddies or anything like, but that our experiences and our approaches are synergistic. That we complement what each other can say. We complete what each other can say. We take it off in different directions and expand it. And I think that's one of the potential great things that we can do in a show like this. And again, I've started a lot of things like this, and they generally grow from outside input. And that's the reason I'd like to suggest, help us. Sonni and I are sitting here brainstorming topics. I used to brainstorm topics, and then all of a sudden 50 of them came in on the internet, and I just said, okay, we don't have to brainstorm anymore. Let's just start prioritizing these, and we'd love to have that. We'd love to make this real to you out there, and something that maybe we can give you an insight. Well, one of my old adages is that all progress begins with thinking differently. if you think the way you've always thought, you'll do what you've always done and get all the results you've always gotten. But if we can give you a new idea, a new approach, I think that's valuable.
In fact, George, thanks, George, for joining us. It would be great to clarify the difference between management in safety and leadership. Good topic.
Excellent point. You're right on. You're right on subject.
Yeah, good topic. Mal says, "Oh, you're on YouTube now. You jump from LinkedIn to YouTube." So I'll try and get here as often as possible. Mal, come on, you can do better than that. LMRA is situational awareness. Okay, thank you, Midney. So many of you with some great comments on here, and I do please emphasize, and Terry will reinforce this. It's important that you send us a email. Let us know well in advance if you can. If not, don't worry, we will pick it up. We're reasonably quick thinking on our feet, but send us an email, live@redrisks.com. All about Let's Learn.
Let's bring up that situational awareness again too, because I think that's an interesting little nuance to what we're doing.
Yeah. Terry, I thoroughly enjoyed this. Oh, wait a minute, what happened there? Can you hear me okay?
Sure.
I thoroughly enjoyed this. I think going forward, we've got a lot to talk about and a lot to cover. Next session's next Tuesday, but earlier time. It's going to be 3 p.m. Today it was 4 p.m. UK time, purely because we had some scheduling issues. But we're going to fix to a standard time, Terry, 3 p.m. every Tuesday, unless otherwise advertised.
Absolutely, and I promise not to make doctor's appointments 5 weeks in the head before we do it this time. Scared me to death.
Mal, I disagree with you, mate. Multitasking. Ask my wife. She says men can't multitask. Terry, thank you so much for your time. And
that's a good topic, though, Mal, because I think that is something that gets into a lot of safety that I've worked with over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. Just before I close out, there's a couple of things I do want to do. If you can stay with me, please, Terry. I'm just gonna share a screen here. Okay, so I want to cover a couple of things. On Thursday is our next live session, and we are going to be having a guest speaker, Professor Dr. Andrew Sharman, who's going to talk about 1% safer. Now, you may have mentioned this, may have heard me mention it in a previous show. This one's good because we've got our collection of colleagues from across the world, Dang from Vietnam, all the way through to Jorge in Mexico, covering the board. So it's going to be an interesting session. Join us if you can. That is on the 1st of October, which is this Thursday, 3 p.m. London time, always on a Thursday at that time, 7:30 Indian Standard Time and 10 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And one final thing, because this SG Live, and I'm going to get Terry involved in a lot more of these, provided you can spare me the time. The 3 pillars are connect, share, and learn. So Terry and I will share the learn sessions on Tuesdays. Thursdays, we will share with our colleagues across the world and with you during these discussions. And on Fridays, it's just a little bit of a me time, me and you, where you can ask me stuff or you can tell us stuff. So it's all about connecting and keeping us all sort of going during these challenging times. Terry, just going to take this off the screen, come back to you if I can. Just bear with me. Back. So lots of shows, lots of things to do. Some final questions coming in. One from Midney, please. How to check the effectiveness of a BBS program? Oh, Midney, you asked the toughest of questions. That is a separate session altogether, my friend.
I've only presented that at ASSP about 40 times now, so I'd be glad to share some ideas.
Let's add that to the bucket. Workers rehabilitation program would also be a good topic. Oh, that. Not sure if I'm qualified to talk about it. We may have to bring someone in, Terry, if you know someone who could talk about that.
Absolutely, and it's interesting because some of the programs that started out as rehab programs turned into proactive programs. You know, they realized that instead of waiting until the worker got injured, keep the worker from getting injured.
Yeah.
You know, and they took a lot of the learnings from one and applied it to the other. So yeah, I know
Yeah.
several people in that field.
Kyril, sorry, it's 12 o'clock midnight for
Yeah.
you. We try and do our best to find the sweet spot in terms of timings. Next one will be a bit different. We'll bring it forward from 4 till 3 o'clock. Hope that helps a little bit. If anyone misses any of these shows, by the way, they are uploaded onto the YouTube channel, so please check it out. Question here from We're just going to tidy up with a few more questions. What is the best reference for oil and gas competency management? Wow. Ooh.
The best, huh?
I'm going to have to say we'll cover that in a separate topic. All these comments that we get here, we'll run it off screen separately and collect them. BBS question, that's for Dom. BBSQ, that's for Dom. Well, we can get Dominic Cooper online as well. All of us will have a good chat. Dom gets very excited, though. I'm sure he'll find time to spare some of his time with us. Prevention is better than cure, Terry. Very good. Okay.
Absolutely.
Folks,
good topic.
Absolutely. Lots and lots of comments coming in. I'm sorry to say we're going to have to love you and leave you for now. We've hit 1 hour, but I'm really, really excited by the folks who've taken part. Sorry it's late in the evenings for some of you. Terry, last few comments. Any thoughts?
Thank you for all of your input on this. Again, we need topics. One of the ladies that manages the American Society of Safety Professionals said, "Gee, Terry, we like you because you can speak on any topic." And I joked back with her that I don't even need a topic, but that's not really true. I really do need a topic, you know. And the more you focus me on something and say, "Let's talk about this particular thing," the more I think I can bring my experience and expertise to bear and maybe help you look at some different possibilities of how you can handle those problems.
Well said, Terry. Thank you so much. Folks online, thank you so much. Join us on Thursday with Andrew Sharman and a group of people from around the world, where I'm sure we can make it quite exciting. Other than that, I wish you a very pleasant day, evening, sleep, whatever, and catch up with you soon. We're going to run the VT for the outro. Terry, catch you soon.
Thanks, Sonni.
Take care.